Streaming and podcasting are awesome and incredibly fun, but things can quickly start to get expensive and super complex once you start looking to level up your quality. So I wanted to make this video as a guide for the ultimate simple 4K Mac streaming and podcasting setup. Keep in mind that we're not making the ultimate setup. We're not going to be that extreme with our streams, but we're also not making the cheapest or simplest setup either. So instead, we're kind of looking at where those things like intersect, where they peak, so we can get the ultimate simple setup. And one of the cool things about this is that there is a lot of overlap between a great streaming setup and a great podcasting setup. So once you've built one, you've instantly got the other, which is why this setup will work for streaming and podcasting. This is a longer video, but I wanted it to be as comprehensive as possible, so use the chapter markers to skip around if you need to, and check out the full recommended gear list in the description. Now, let's kick things off by talking about computers. Your computer is the heart of your streaming setup, but fortunately you don't have to spend a ton of money to get a decent streaming computer. It definitely is a good idea to get the most powerful computer you can afford that includes as much RAM, memory, and graphics power as possible, but you don't need to go into massive debt to do this. And the reason I'm basing this entire setup around the Mac platform is because of a software application called Ecamm Live, which is Mac only. It's the streaming software I highly recommend. We're gonna talk all about that in a little bit, but I do wanna mention that OBS is also an amazing free software option that does work with Windows. But again, we're thinking of ultimate plus simple. So in that case, the answer is Ecamm, which means the solution for streaming is a Mac. Now the good news here is that any M series Mac will do for this setup. I use this right here is running a 4-year-old base model M1 Mac Mini, and it's what I use for most of my streams and podcasts and has been for 4 years now. This is literally the least powerful M series computer ever made. They don't make it anymore, it's out of date, but it's the least powerful one ever made, and it is great. I can stream in 4K, I can run multiple applications at once, I can pretty much do anything I need to do with this computer, and the good news for you is that because this computer is 4 years old and out of date, any current Apple computer you buy will be more powerful and more capable. So again, just get whatever is within your budget if you don't already have an M series Mac, but like a base model Mac Mini is usually a good place to start. But they'll work with any keyboard, mouse, or monitor that you have. I'm not using Apple, well this is an Apple mouse, not Apple keyboard, not Apple display, but Apple Mac Mini down there. And this computer, it's phenomenal. But of course you could use MacBooks and any other Mac. You just need an M series processor to make things really run their absolute best. For this setup though, the base model is more than capable, so you don't have to spend a ton of money, even though it is always a good idea to get as much computer power as you can afford. And if you're using a laptop instead of a desktop, then as soon as you get your computer, you're pretty much all set. You don't necessarily need the external mouse, display, keyboard, or anything. You can just stream straight from your laptop. Now we're gonna come back and talk about the amazing Ecamm Live software in just a little bit, but before that, let's focus on cameras. I'm going to go through everything you need for video, from camera and lens all the way to tripod and cables, all the small things. First things first, for this setup though, do not use a webcam as your main camera. Webcams can be great. And there's nothing wrong with a setup that uses a webcam. But in this case, we're trying to level things up above and beyond the norm. So that means we're going to need a camera with interchangeable lenses. And no matter what a webcam's ad campaign and marketing materials might say, they cannot compete with a mirrorless camera and interchangeable lenses. It's just not in the realm of possibility. And fortunately, there are a ton of great mirrorless camera options out there that can work incredibly well for streaming. If you don't already have a camera, my go-to recommendation is the Sony ZV-E10. This has an MSRP of $700 for the camera only and $800 for the camera with a basic kit lens. There are less expensive cameras out there. You can get cameras for under $700, but in my experience, all of those less expensive cameras have some sort of annoying limitations or are missing features. So whatever you save in money, you're just going to end up paying for in frustration, and then you'll probably end up buying a different camera anyway down the line because you get so frustrated. So instead of paying twice, just pay a little bit more once and get something that's really great. There is a newer ZV-E10 Mark II, which has some cool updated features and all that cool stuff. It's a little more expensive though. It's like $1,100 or something along those lines. This one, the original ZV-E10, especially at its lower price point, is just absolutely awesome. The reason I like the ZV-E10 is because it is a 4K camera with absolutely incredible autofocus, so you'll never have to worry about being seen clearly. Plus, this camera, believe it or not, has the added benefit of being a camera. So that means you can unplug it and take it away from your setup. You can take it out into the world for photos and videos. A webcam is permanently tied to your computer, cannot function without that USB umbilical cord with the computer. In this case, you're buying a cool streaming camera, but you're also just buying an awesome camera. And the reason I think it's important to choose a camera with interchangeable lenses rather than a built-in lens is because, one, it's even with a kit lens going to outperform any webcam just right out of the box. But because you can change the lens, that gives you the chance to change and evolve your setup over time as your different needs and tastes and preferences change. So your setup can constantly evolve without you having to change your camera and just swapping out your lenses instead. And a cool thing too, especially if you do get the kit lens edition, is that it'll help you figure out what you like and don't like. You might decide that you like something like I'm using right now. This is a wide shot. You can see everything in frame. You can see my whole space. You can see me. You can see the table. But you might also decide that you want something like this. This is 50 millimeters, this was 24 millimeters, 50 millimeters, a lot more cropped in. This keeps the attention on the subject. You can't see the table, you can't see much of my environment. It's not better or worse, it's just different, and they have different needs and different purposes. And you could, if your streaming setup evolves to a certain point, you can have multiple cameras and multiple lenses, but we don't need to go down that route just yet. For now, just know that getting a good mirrorless camera, especially like this, the $100 extra for the kit lens, really a good way to help you not only get up and running right away, but help you figure out what you like. So if you're not sure about the world of lenses or you are trying to work within a budget, that's where I definitely recommend getting the ZV-E10 that comes with the kit lens. That has an MSRP of $800. The lens that you'll get is the Sony 16 to 50 millimeter, which is a very decent but basic kit lens. And even though it's not the best camera lens in the world, the fact that it does let you zoom from 16, which is pretty wide, all the way to 50, which is pretty tight, that's going to give you a chance to experience and experiment with different focal lengths to decide what kind of lens you might want if you ever do decide that you want to upgrade. But if you're saying, hey, I don't want the kit lens, what lens should I get? Maybe you like the quality I have right here and you want something that looks like this. My recommendation is the Sigma 16mm f1.4. This lens is phenomenal, and it will give you a super sharp image with a really nice blurry background. So this right here is kind of the secret weapon when it comes to great looking streaming video and podcasting video, because you have the ZV-E10, the Sigma 16, their powers combined, and you get this. This is the Sony ZV-E10 with the Sigma 16. I set it right next to my Sony FX3 with the Sony 24, which is what I've been using to film this entire video so far. The FX3 with the lens that I'm using right now costs over $5,000. The camera's $3,900, the lens is $1,400 MSRP. It's a very expensive setup. This right over here, the ZV-E10, is under $1,100 for the whole setup. That's a $4,000 difference between this and this. And the reason I'm using the Sigma 16mm on this instead of a 24mm lens is because this is a crop sensor camera. So 16mm on a smaller sensor ends up looking the same, roughly the same, as 24mm on a full frame camera. And this is also an f1.4 lens, which means you're getting pretty much the same level of background blur as you're getting with the more expensive setup over here. Now the thing to keep in mind is, even though this is significantly less expensive, it doesn't mean anyone who buys the FX3 is crazy. This camera serves other purposes and has a lot of other features and things that are good for certain workflows. But when we're talking about basic talking head style setups like this, there's virtually no difference in image quality between the two cameras. Now, once you've chosen your camera, connecting it to your computer can sometimes be a little bit tricky. A lot of newer cameras can just be used as USB webcams, which is about as simple as it gets. All you need to do in that case is connect your camera to your computer with a USB cable, and it's gonna show up as a video source, and you're done. Except, not every camera works this way, and even with the ones that do, there are often a lot of limitations. So for example, the ZV-E10, as wonderful as this camera is, when you connect it with USB, it only streams at 720p, which is like the lowest barrier of high definition, nowhere near 4K. So it still looks great. If that's all you got, it still looks good and it's usable. But again, the whole point of this setup is that we're not going for good enough. We're going for the best we can get. So even my much more expensive full frame cameras, like this is the Sony a7 IV, $2,400, $700, $800 right here. Even this through USB is capped at 1080p, so it's full high definition, but not 4K. So if I want to get a genuine 4K signal for streaming and stuff out of this computer, I need to use a capture card. My number one recommendation for capture cards is this right here, which is the Elgato Cam Link. It's simple, it's affordable with an MSRP of about $100, and it supports 4K. There are similar looking little HDMI capture cards like this. Sometimes you see them for like $25 or $30, and it's like, hey, that looks exactly the same, I'll just get that. Just stay away from them. The quality tends to not be as good. They aren't typically as compatible, and they're nowhere near as reliable. So I definitely cannot recommend those, but I can't recommend this enough. And you're probably, from here on out, gonna notice a running theme with me recommending a lot of Elgato stuff in this video, which is not a sponsored video. It's just that when it comes to a lot of streaming gear, for me, I think Elgato kind of hits that sweet spot between price, performance, and reliability. And in this case, when we're trying to hit that sweet spot between, power and capability versus still relatively simple, Elgato stuff just kind of fits in really well into that workflow. The Cam Link is also a great choice because it does not require a separate power source. It's powered through your computer's USB. Sometimes, if you're using something like my MacBook Pro right here, which only has USB-C, you might need to connect this to a USB-A to C adapter, but that works fine. I've had no issues running this through adapters. This isn't even an official Apple one. This was like a 2-pack I got on Amazon. And it's also important to note that the Sony ZV-E10 has a micro HDMI output. This is a small compact camera. They couldn't really fit a full-size HDMI on there. On my bigger cameras, they just have a full-size regular HDMI port. This has micro, so that means you're going to need a micro HDMI to full-size HDMI cable to get this into your capture card. There are also full-size to micro adapters, which you can use, but sometimes they can get a little funky with the 4K signal. And since we're talking about HDMI cables, if possible, I recommend going for a lighter weight HDMI cables rather than the bigger heavy duty ones. I know these can seem like a good idea and sometimes they are the right choice, but when it comes to a cable that's going to be running out of a camera for a long time, sometimes these big heavy cables can put so much weight and stress on the camera that the cable itself can easily get pulled out because it's so heavy, or especially with these more delicate micro HDMI ports, the heavy cable can start to kind of damage the port and put a lot of stress on the camera over time. If you're using a lightweight cable, it really puts a lot less stress on this port, which is important to remember. And this is all you need to get a signal from a single camera. You just need your camera, HDMI cable into a capture card, and you're done. Now, we're not gonna spend too much time talking about multiple cameras because we are trying to keep things relatively simple here, but if you do wanna add more than one camera, there are a few different ways to do it. You can add multiple USB sources. So if you have another camera, you just want to connect it through USB, or depending on your computer's power, you might be able to power 2 capture cards. That's totally a way to do it. This is also a time when you might be able to use a webcam because even though I wouldn't recommend using this for your main camera, if you have a secondary angle or a top-down shot that doesn't need to be the highest quality all the time, it just needs to be clear and easy to see, that's where a USB webcam can be really helpful in your streaming setup. But if you want to connect multiple HDMI cameras or video sources, then you will need a multi-input switcher like this. This is the Blackmagic ATEM Mini. The downside with this and a lot of switchers that look like this and work like this is that 4K is very tricky. It's very likely that if you want to do multi-HDMI streaming, you're going to then have to downgrade to 1080 since most switchers, especially in any kind of reasonable price points, are 1080 and not 4K. And I do have a whole bunch of videos about ATEMs and camera switchers if you do want to dive a little bit deeper into that world of multicam setups. So now, even though we've got a camera and we figured out how to connect it to a computer, that's not enough. You probably don't want to just be holding your camera the whole time you're streaming or podcasting because that will get tiring very, very quickly. So you definitely need a stand, a support of some kind for your camera. If you're using a table or a desk that's not up against the wall, you can use pretty much any tripod or stand you want. That's what I'm doing right now. There's space in front of me, there's space in front of the desk. I can have my camera on a tripod right in front of here and it works great. Just in that case, be sure that you don't get like the cheapest, flimsiest tripod possible. It's very common for people to feel like they have spent a lot of money on their streaming setup, so they want to save where they can, and instead of spending another $100 to $200 on a decent tripod, they buy the cheapest thing they can find or dig something out of the garage or the attic, and now their whole expensive setup is resting on this flimsy old tripod that they're just hoping doesn't collapse and ruin everything. So it's worth investing in a very decent tripod, especially for this specific setup. Now, if your desk is up against a wall like mine here, it can be a little bit trickier to position your camera. So what I found works best is to use a small tabletop stand like this. This is an iFootage Cobra 2. It's actually a little monopod stand, so it extends and gets tall. But what's really nice about this is it has this sturdy metal platform. It doesn't have 3 legs like a tripod. A small tripod can be great too, but then these 3 legs take up more space on your desk, whereas this just has a flat base and then one post that's easy to then position and maneuver your existing equipment and stuff around. So this is a really sturdy little stand, and then I've been using this iFootage Komodo tripod head. This has a Manfrotto style plate, which is my personal favorite because they tend to be really heavy duty, and that's what I use on all my other stuff. So I can just put different cameras on here. This tripod head just screws right on here, and now I have an incredibly sturdy, heavy duty camera stand. Now, one thing you might be thinking is that this is maybe a little bit overkill for the relatively lightweight Sony ZV-E10, and you would be correct, but there is one last piece to this puzzle, which is the thing I'm looking at right now, if I can very elegantly take that off of here, and that is the Elgato Prompter. You might wonder if the Elgato Prompter is 100% necessary, and in some setups it might not be, but for me personally, this has literally been one of the most game-changing pieces of equipment I have ever bought and added to my setup. I have a whole bunch of videos about the Elgato Prompter to check out. It basically just acts as another display on your computer, but of course you can then pop up your script. But in addition to that, you don't just have to pop up your script because it is a display. That means you can put a reference monitor if you want to see yourself while you're streaming. It means you can put video calls. It means you can put whatever you want on here. Many of those things being incredibly helpful when you're streaming. So there's a bunch of different ways to mount the Elgato Prompter. It does come with this lens adapter that will fit a bunch of different lenses, and then I can just slide this right on here. And now this is why I recommend having a sturdy tripod setup, because you're putting not just a camera, not just a lens, but then also the Elgato Prompter on here. And this is your streaming camera setup, at least my most recommended streaming camera setup. Usually I have mine just kind of placed right over here. It's out of the way when I'm working on stuff, but it's right there, perfect eye level for video calls. And this is an adjustable stand, so it could go taller if I wanted it to. But if I was using something flimsier or something weaker, this could easily tip over or fall or just not support the weight that I have on it. And this is also why I recommend using a nice heavy-duty video tripod head, not just to make sure it supports everything, but to also then let you easily adjust your framing and your composition once you have your camera in place. So now we can say adios to video and move on to talking about audio. The simplest way to level up your audio is with a USB microphone. These are two of my favorites, the Sennheiser Profile and the Rode NT USB Plus. I love them because they both sound incredible. The Sennheiser is really, really simple and has a ton of manual controls, whereas the Rode is a little more complicated and pairs with Rode Central software where you can do all kinds of effects, EQ, and processing. So simple, a little more complicated, both amazing. But just like with cameras, if you want to take things a little bit further, which in this case we do, then I would recommend stepping into the world of XLR microphones, where you have pretty much unlimited options at unlimited price points. The important thing to keep in mind though with an XLR microphone is that you will need an interface for it. You cannot connect an XLR cable directly to your computer. You need something like this. This is the Lewitt Connect 2, which is one of my favorite simple interfaces. This lets me connect an XLR microphone right to the back of it, and then this connects to my computer through USB. There are a ton of great simple interfaces out there. The thing to look out for in one is to make sure that it has at least 70 decibels of clean gain, because then that will be able to run pretty much any mic that you want to use with it. Again, we want to take things a little bit further. This is a great basic thing to get an XLR mic into your computer, but to go even further, that's when I recommend using a mixer interface like the Rodecaster Pro 2 or the Rodecaster Duo, which I've got back there on my desk. The Rodecaster Pro 2 would let you connect up to 4 XLR microphones, and the Duo, as the name implies, lets you connect 2. Internally, these two mixers are exactly the same. So feature-wise, you're not losing anything with the Duo. The only difference is the number of inputs and the price, because the Duo does have a lower price of $499. The reason I love these types of mixers is because they let you do a lot without needing to fiddle with software, and they also take all of that processing off of your computer. So while your computer's streaming and doing all that, now you're offloading basically the whole audio workload to a separate device. You have a lot of built-in processing and EQ options. Right now I'm using the Shure SM7B and I have a lot of processing and EQ turned on. If I turn that off, this is what the microphone would sound like straight out of the box, but because I've turned on some settings in here, now I can make it sound exactly how I want in my environment. And that's important because everybody's voice is different, the type of equipment you're using is different, the environment you're in is different, your preferences are different, so it does take a bit of experimenting to dial in your audio. Now, when we're talking about microphones, there are essentially two main types you're going to be choosing from, dynamic and condenser. This is the Shure SM7B, which is a dynamic microphone, and the reason you might want to choose a dynamic microphone is because, generally speaking, they're a little bit better at rejecting unwanted noise. They usually do require higher levels of gain. Most modern interfaces like the Roadcasters and stuff can power this microphone no problem. But if you're using an interface that has less than 70 decibels of clean gain, or maybe it's just an interface where it has enough but it's sounding really noisy, then you might need a booster to boost the clean gain signal. I have a whole video about these, but for now, the Cliff Notes version is just that the Clark Technic CT1 is a great budget-friendly option. It's like $30 or $40, and then you can boost the SM7B signal to work with pretty much any interface if you need to. And the other type of microphone is a condenser microphone like this, the Lewitt LCT240. Condenser microphones rely on phantom power, which every mixer and interface has, so you don't really need to worry about that. Once you turn on phantom power, you're gonna get enough gain signal from this microphone. The great thing about condensers is they typically do require a lot less gain because they are running on phantom power. So not only do you never need to use a booster with them, but you can't use a booster with condenser microphones. The downside is that sometimes, again, speaking very generally, they can pick up more of your environmental sound. So that sometimes makes them not the best choice if you're in a space that's not really well sound treated. And it is important, whichever microphone you choose, to make sure you learn about the pickup pattern, how your microphone picks up sound. If I take my pop filter off and now I Peter Piper pitched a podcast into the front of the microphone, you're hearing all kinds of plosive. The pop filter can help with that, but also learning that I can position the microphone slightly at an angle doesn't really change the sound quality. And now Peter Piper pitched a podcast, I'm not giving it a bunch of plosives or anything, so figuring out how to position your microphone is great. There's no right or wrong when it comes to microphones, it's all just personal preference, but in either case, the dynamic or the condenser, both of these microphones really are designed to be about 6 to 12 inches from the speaker's face. If you get a microphone like one of these and then you end up putting it really far away, like a boom microphone, it's just not going to sound great. So you wanna make sure you know how your specific microphone needs to be positioned. Now, if you don't wanna use a microphone like this, where it's in front of your face and in the frame and visible on camera, you can use shotgun or pencil condenser microphones to act as a boom microphone positioned out of frame. The boom microphone that I typically use, my favorite one of all time, is the Sennheiser MKH50. It is phenomenal, but it also has a retail price of $1,200. This is the Audio-Technica AT897, which has a retail price of $250, so it's significantly more affordable and also sounds great. Now I'm using the Audio-Technica mic boomed just out of frame, and this is what that sounds like. So if you want a clean frame with no mics in it, you could go with a boom microphone. But as you can see, I'm not holding the microphone out of frame, and earlier when I was using these and I was holding them, that's again, not super practical to do on a stream for a long time. So that means you're gonna need an arm or some type of stand to hold your microphone. There are really two different types, low and tall. This is the Elgato low profile arm, a very good low profile arm that kind of gets out of the way. This is the Rode PSA-1 Plus, a more traditional sort of tall mic stand. This is the Rode PSA-1, which is a slightly different version of the same one. And this is the Elgato Wave, which is even taller. The cool thing about these, you can find one that suits your specific needs and preferences, low versus high, but they can also be really versatile. So if you do want to use a boom arm positioned out of frame, sometimes you can get by just using one of these tall arms positioned out of frame, and that can hold your boom microphone. There are a whole bunch of different options out there. I have found that the Rode and Elgato arms tend to be the best overall, the most reliable, and not the crazy most expensive either, but it's really important to find what works best in your space. And of course, you will need an XLR cable. Most USB microphones do come with a USB cable, but XLR microphones usually do not. I do really prefer these Rode XLR cables because I think that they're fairly priced. They come in different lengths, they're good quality, and they are available in a wide variety of colors, which I really like. They do have black if you just want plain black. And then aside from that, a pair of headphones is really important. Even if you don't wear your headphones on stream, having a good pair of production headphones is really critical. when it's time to edit and monitor any sort of audio. So I did actually make a whole video about this, but the spoiler of that video is that when it comes to production or creator headphones, I really prefer the Rode NTH100s. I love these a lot. So now we've got our streaming setup put together. This is the Sony ZV-E10 and the Sigma 16mm lens with the Elgato Prompter running into the base model M1 Mac Mini and being recorded into Ecamm Live. For audio, I have the Shure SM4, which is a condenser microphone running into the Rodecaster Duo. So it's all the types of stuff that we talked about in the other parts of this video. But now it's time to take a hard look at software, because streaming is all about taking an audio source and a video source, smushing them together, and then sharing it with the world. And in this case, we're going with Ecamm Live. The reason being, because it's the best. I did want to make this a Mac-specific setup, specifically because of Ecamm Live, and it is Mac-only software. So here's the basic layout for Ecamm Live and what it looks like. A really cool thing is that it is very, very modular. So I have my window here, and all of these little settings windows can be moved or changed or even closed, turned on, whatever. Every input, like here's my Camlink input, I can change the color and the settings right here, so I can adjust what that looks like or even add a LUT to make it look the way that I want it to look. I've got all my different scenes in Ecamm, so if I want to do something like do a screen share, I can then select myself down here. We're gonna select Camlink. So now I'm down here and I've got a screen share going, and I can make all of these scenes right in Ecamm. I can create tons of different ones. Here's my podcast outro. Here's just, basically everything, all kinds of cool stuff happening here. I've got my main shot right here that we're gonna go for. And so here are my basic Ecamm settings. I can click the little gear icon here, go to the stream tab, and you can see that I am in 4K, I'm using the Camlink 4K, so I want to take advantage of that. Stream shape is wide, I just want to do regular widescreen, and frame rate is 24. You might want to stream at 30 or even 60 if you want to, but I like 24, so that's where I'm going. Using high quality video mode is important, and then also high quality audio is really important as well. And now for 4K streaming, this is something that is incredibly cool. You can run a speed test right here. So it's telling me that if I want to stream to one destination, like I want to just stream to my YouTube channel, I need 12.3 megabits per second. I can change that if I wanted to stream to, YouTube and Facebook, or YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, and then it will just run a speed test right here. We did recently just upgrade finally to fiber internet. It was finally available here, and it was a way easier process than I expected. I thought it was going to be kind of a nightmare, and it really it took like an hour. It was not hard at all. And now we have internet that is fast enough to stream in 4K. And so right now you can see I only need 12.3 megabits per second to stream in 4K. We currently have 200, and that's also just on Wi-Fi. I'm not even plugged into Ethernet, which is pretty cool. And that's more than enough to stream. I've been streaming on the Mac Mini, this whole setup in 4K, several times now since we've had the internet upgraded, and it has been absolutely awesome. It's also worth noting that Ecamm does have a built-in Zoom integration, so if you want to bring in guests through Zoom to be on podcast or stream, you can do that. There's also a built-in interview mode, and if you're recording, you can record isolated audio and video tracks for each person. The more that you want to record isolated tracks and stuff, the more you might need a beefier, computer. You might need to upgrade a few things to make that all run smoothly if you're trying to do 4 high resolution video and audio sources at the same time. But it is possible through Ecamm, and it's incredibly useful. You can also use it as a virtual camera, so you can select Ecamm in Zoom or whatever video software you're using, and now all of your settings and your coloring and even your graphics and your scenes can carry over into those applications as well. So I could go on about Ecamm for a really long time, but hopefully this lets you see at least the basics of how we're setting up this streaming setup here. And if I go to my streaming destinations, we can see that I have my YouTube channel right here. So in this window, I have it set to stream. We can also stream and record or do nothing and just use the virtual camera. If I wanted to stream, I can then click a new stream, and this can just be a new stream that I create right here through Ecamm. So if I had already scheduled a stream, as soon as I turn on this stream mode, it will just show up down here. There'll be a little button that says go live in however many minutes until the stream goes live, and I can just click that and it will go to that feed, even though I didn't necessarily create that through Ecamm on this computer. And of course, you can take this a bit further and now use this as your recording setup. It doesn't have to just be for streaming. My wife in her office, she's not taken the memory card out of her computer in like 3 years or more, because everything is just done into Ecamm Live through a base model, M1 Mac Mini. So this can be your streaming, recording, podcasting, and video conferencing setup. So while that covers the essentials of getting your audio and video into a stream in your computer, there are also a ton of other things you might want to consider too. In many cases, I think it's important to remember that a streaming setup is usually never finished. It's just something that kind of keeps evolving over time. And for me, that's honestly half the fun. So that doesn't have to be a negative thing. That can be a fun part of the journey and a fun part of the process. But there are a few additional things to keep in mind, the first of which being lighting. Now, I would be delighted to go into super detail about this, but that probably does kind of deserve its own video. So for now, let me just encourage you to invest in some video-specific lights. A 60-watt LED in a small softbox can do wonders, and if you're short on space, 1 or 2 of the Elgato key lights can be a huge help. I really like these because they're pretty heavy duty, but they're still super compact, and they come with the mount, like the rod that clamps to your desk. Basically, it's the whole setup in the box, and they work really well. You also don't have to aim your lights directly at you because sometimes that can look a little too bright and harsh. You can do what I'm doing here and bounce the light off of a wall or a ceiling to get a softer look. You can also add a lot of style and dimension to your background using accent lights. There are some cheaper RGB lights out there that have a tendency to flicker on camera. They look cool in person, but once they're on camera, it just looks like some crazy EDM show. So definitely stick with more reputable brands or lights that have good reviews. Elgato, once again, makes an awesome RGB light strip. That's what I've got back here on my desk. I really love the Elgato RGB light strip, but there's also another brand called Govee, which has a huge ecosystem of budget-friendly lights that are super high quality and really versatile, and at least in my experience, seem to be very video compatible. We recently redid my wife's office studio, and she used Govee for pretty much everything except her main video light, and it looks awesome, both in person and on camera. So Govee. And finally, if you're streaming, an Elgato Stream Deck is something that is super nice to have. If you don't know what a Stream Deck is, it's a small programmable keypad that lets you assign pretty much anything to any button, and each button is its own little screen, so they can be super customizable. It's very tactile, you can feel it. If you're not looking at it, you can even feel what you're doing, so it kind of really helps you to multitask while streaming. And it's super cool because any button can be something super simple, like changing a scene or adding a graphic, but you can also make it more complex, like key combinations or even system commands for your computer. I have an older Stream Deck, but they come in all different sizes and configurations and prices. It's definitely one of the coolest and most helpful accessories you can get, since it can put the most important functions in one tactile spot while you're streaming, which helps you from splitting your attention too much. When you're streaming, you're trying to be on camera, and you're trying to keep track of what you're talking about, you're trying to pay attention to viewers and to chat, and you're also trying to be the production crew running everything here. So the Stream Deck kind of lets you take the essentials, puts them right in front of you, you can kind of block out a lot of the other things, and now you've just got this. It's incredibly helpful if you've never used one. And of course, everything talked about in this video is based on my own personal experience and recommendations, so feel free where necessary to swap in different types of gear or change things up to suit your specific needs. But my goal here is to give you everything you need to understand the fundamentals so you can have more fun instead of going mental. And speaking of having more fun, thank you to everyone who helps support my channel through Patreon and YouTube channel memberships. And if you want to learn more about live streaming and podcasting, check out these videos right here.